As the hearing room emptied, the echo of Bondi's revelations still hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Outside the Capitol, the media frenzy had already begun. News vans lined the curbs. Flashing red banners flooded television screens. Van Hollen faces ethics firestorm. Bondi drops bombshell at security hearing. But inside Van Hollen's private office, panic had arrived in silence. He paced behind closed doors, surrounded by a handful of advisors, their faces pale and their voices low. The evidence Bondi had presented couldn't be dismissed with soundbites anymore. It was real. It had legs. And the public, they were watching. Across town, Bondi was already one step ahead. She wasn't giving interviews. She wasn't celebrating. Instead, she sat alone in a quiet federal office, submitting a formal complaint to the Senate Ethics Committee, complete with files, supporting emails, financial logs, and whistleblower testimony. She knew this wasn't over. In fact, she was sure it had only just begun. That evening, a new detail surfaced, one even Bondi hadn't revealed during the hearing. A leaked memo from Sentinel Strategies. The memo outlined their intent to integrate behavioral prediction models into K-12 public school systems, funded directly through the reallocation bill. Not just supplying tech, monitoring behavior, emotions, even political leanings of students under the guise of learning assistance. The internet lit up. Parents, teachers, civil liberties groups, they exploded into action. Petitions were launched. Social media boiled over with hashtags like #Datagate, #ProtectOurKids, and #BanSentinel. And in the middle of the storm, Senator Van Hollen said nothing. He canceled 2 public events, refused interviews. His staff issued a cold 2-line statement. The senator stands by the transparency of his work and welcomes any formal review. But the silence only made it worse. A day later, an anonymous whistleblower, confirmed to be a junior staffer on Van Hollen's education committee, came forward on a major news outlet. With their voice distorted and identity hidden, the staffer said, "There were directives to fast-track the contract approvals. We were told not to copy certain memos via email." Everything felt off. The interviewer leaned in. Did Senator Van Hollen know? A pause. He wasn't just aware, the staffer said. He approved it. The country snapped to attention. Major newspapers called for an independent investigation. A bipartisan group of senators, including some who'd once supported the bill, demanded a formal audit. And yet, Bondi still hadn't spoken again. Until that Friday night, she appeared on a nationally televised news special. Calm, focused, not angry but deeply, visibly concerned. "This isn't about me or one senator," she said. "It's about power being used in the shadows. This bill was sold as progress, but underneath it was something far more dangerous, a system built to watch, record, and manipulate. Our children were the test subjects." The host leaned in. "Do you believe this was intentional?" Her reply was chilling. "I believe it was strategic. And I believe we haven't seen the last of it." In just 5 days, Bondi had gone from forgotten former prosecutor to national lightning rod, sparking debate not only about ethics, but about privacy, surveillance, and how far lawmakers would go to blur the lines between policy and profit. Behind the scenes, allies of Van Hollen scrambled to clean up the mess. Old interviews were scrubbed. PAC donation logs were updated. One consulting firm even took down its website overnight. But the digital footprint was too large. The trail had already been followed. Screenshots, archived PDFs, whistleblowers, public records. Every effort to cover up only fueled suspicion further. And through it all, Pam Bondi didn't waver. Days passed, but the political air hadn't cleared. It thickened. What had started as a quiet policy hearing had erupted into a national reckoning. News cycles couldn't keep up. Online forums buzzed with theories. Talk shows argued hour after hour. What did Van Hollen know? When did he know it? And how deep did the Sentinel connection go? And yet, Van Hollen had said nothing since the initial storm. Until now. On a cool Monday morning, flanked by 3 aides and a carefully selected backdrop of American flags, Senator Chris Van Hollen stepped in front of reporters. His face was composed but tight. He was no longer deflecting, he was on offense. "I want to be clear," he began. "I have never at any time received compensation, favors, or inside knowledge related to Sentinel strategies or any affiliated entity." Then came the pivot. "But what's happening here," he continued, "is not an investigation. It's a smear. A coordinated attempt to derail a bill that could modernize our education system for millions of underserved students. And it's being led by someone with a personal, political agenda, Pam Bondi." The words dropped like bricks. Bondi's name, said not with fear, but with fire. He wasn't just defending himself now, he was declaring war. Reporters scrambled to respond. One shouted, "Are you saying she fabricated evidence?" Van Hollen didn't flinch. "I'm saying she is a trained prosecutor. And like any prosecutor, she knows how to present a narrative. She doesn't need to lie. She just needs to lead you into believing what she wants." Then, almost as if rehearsed, his office released its own set of documents. A 62-page file labeled Context Pack. It was designed to counter Bondi's claims, pointing out that some of the shell companies she named were also used by other senators, that some of the emails lacked complete chains, that some of the contracts she presented had been approved by bipartisan panels, not just his office. It wasn't a full defense, but it was just enough to cloud the water. And that was the point. The media split instantly. Some headlines read, "Van Hollen reclaims the narrative." Others warned, "The deflection playbook begins." But behind the scenes, something else was happening. 3 new whistleblowers came forward. This time from inside Sentinel itself. Their anonymous testimony leaked to a major network, exposing a chilling quote from a senior executive. "We don't need to spy on kids. We just need to understand what makes them loyal. The rest will follow." The quote went viral. Bondi, who had remained silent through Van Hollen's press offensive, finally broke her silence. Not on TV. Not in print. She released a 30-second video on social media. Just her. No makeup. No lights. A single camera. Her voice calm but razor sharp. "I'm not interested in political theater," she said. "I'm interested in the truth. And the truth doesn't need to yell." Then the camera zoomed in, revealing she was holding something. A subpoena request, filed with the Senate Committee for a formal, open-door investigation into not just Van Hollen, but the entire contracting process involving Sentinel Strategies, Crossline Consulting, and every shell company that had touched the bill. The post gained 10 million views in 6 hours. And then the unexpected twist. A 4th whistleblower stepped forward. This time not anonymous. A former assistant director of Sentinel, who had left just 2 months ago, appearing on live television. He looked nervous, tired, but ready. "Pam Bondi isn't wrong," he said. "In fact, she doesn't even have the full picture." He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. "This," he said, "contains contracts, internal meeting notes, recordings. Everything. If you think this is just about education or campaign funds, you're wrong. This was a test program, and it was never meant to stop at schools." The anchor looked stunned. The screen faded to black. By the next morning, Senate leadership had no choice. So now the question isn't whether Pam Bondi was right. The question is, how much of this was already in motion, and who else was in on it? Because if this one hearing revealed this much, imagine what's still hidden.